The Crown Prince led 5,000 cavalrymen all the way south at an extremely fast speed. It was the standard of a rapid march, traveling nearly 200 miles a day. These were the most elite cavalrymen, even reaching the level of one person with 2 horses. It didn't look impressive, but in fact, in the era of cold weapons, the marching speed was already very fast. Moreover, this cavalry force didn't seem to need to bring any supplies, and they had supplies everywhere they went. When they were still more than 100 li away, the next station had already prepared hot water and delicious food, not to mention military provisions. The Crown Prince Ning Yi only needed to stop to enjoy supreme treatment. However, that was not all. Along the way, there were teams of elite knights who came to seek refuge. All of them were from the rich and powerful families of Yu State. They had brought the most elite warriors of their families, and some of them had even traveled thousands of miles to join the group. Of course, this was like adding flowers to a brocade. But it was also a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Now that the Crown Prince was completely popular, this wave was to gain credit. If he showed his face in front of the Crown Prince, then this investment could be exchanged for 10 times the return. Everyone knew that on the battlefield of the South Phoenix country, the army of Yu country had exceeded 200,000. Jin Jun's Sand primitive army was less than 40,000, and they were facing a food shortage and a plague. This was a battle that they would definitely win. Therefore, before the Crown Prince Ning Yi had even arrived at the southern Heaven City, the number of cavalrymen at his side had already increased to 8,000. More than half of the nobles in the entire Yu country had sent people over. Not only that, every time the Crown Prince's army passed through a city, countless scholars and people would come to welcome them. Of course, the scholars did it on their own. It was because the interests of the Crown Prince were the interests of the scholars of Yu country. His basic position was the civil officials. The civil officials in the world even dared to oppose the king for the position of Crown Prince. As for where these people came from, it was unknown, but in short, they were food and wine, and the people supported them. Moreover, from the day the Crown Prince left the capital, the entire civil servant system began to stir up public opinion. It was getting more and more advanced by the day. It almost made the Battle of Nan Ou the greatest battle in 100 years. It was even more important and greater than the Wu Yu War 20 years ago. As long as they won this war and killed Jin Jun, they would be able to exchange for a few decades of peace and stability in Yu country. There was nothing wrong with this. But the contrast was too much, almost to the point of a holy war. But scholars were like this, their words were shocking. By the time the Crown Prince entered Tiannan province, public opinion had reached its peak. It was like a raging fire, with fresh flowers blooming like brocade. Countless people were also led by the scholars and got high, intoxicated. Soon, the Zhu family felt that they had overused their strength and wanted to cool down a little. But it was too late. At this time, even without the guidance of the Zhu family and the influence of the civil officials, all the scholars in Yu State had fallen into self-satisfaction. The scholars supported the Crown Prince, some martial artists supported the Third Prince, and the fools supported Ning Zheng. This rule had been deeply rooted in people's hearts. All the scholars in Yu State felt that it was everyone's responsibility to protect the Crown Prince's position. This was not even for the Crown Prince, but for the interests of the scholars. They had spontaneously publicized the battle that the Crown Prince was leading. He wrote poems and novels with all his might. He even spent money to let storytellers talk about the War of Nan, and in restaurants and inns. All of a sudden, it was simply overwhelming and the world's attention was focused on it. Even the old farmers in the most remote mountains knew that a sacred war was about to break out. The Crown Prince personally went out to eliminate Yu country's biggest enemy, Jin Jun. This was a war that would destroy the country, and in exchange, Yu country would have decades of peace and stability. Even the fools were chanting on the street, "When the Crown Prince came, the king would die. When the Crown Prince arrived, the great South would fall." Amidst the commotion, the Crown Princess led her cavalry into the southern Heaven City. At this moment, Ning Yi had welcomed the most powerful reinforcement. Sky Sea Pavilion Warrior. There were only 200 of them, but they were all experts. Of course, they had no marks on them. The one leading the 200 Sky Sea Pavilion warriors was another in-name disciple of pavilion masters was C.I. Li Nanfeng. From this, it could be seen how much importance Princess Ning Han placed on Ning Yi's battle. These 200 experts only had one purpose, to protect Ning Yi. This was the true pride of the heavens. He was loved by all. The Crown Prince entered the governor's office and met with Governor Zhu Rong. Governor General Zhu Rong's illness was real. He had been working hard for the past few months and was indeed exhausted. However, it was true that her illness was so serious. She only appeared to be in critical condition after taking special medicine. Your Highness, I cannot bow to you. Uncle, there's no need to be so polite. I'll always remember what you've done for me, Ning Yi said. It's been almost a month since the 200,000 soldiers of you have surrounded Jinjuan's 30,000-strong army, but we don't dare to fight without your presence, Governor Zhu Rong said. Of course he didn't dare to fight. If the Crown Prince didn't come, the war would be completely won, and Jinjun would be killed. That would be awkward. If you fall before I even shoot, would it make me look like a good marksman? Your Highness, everything is ready on the battlefield of the South Phoenix Nation. All that's left is the east wind, and that east wind is you, Governor Zhu Rong said. Have all the supplies been prepared? The Crown Prince asked. Everything is in order, Governor Zhu Rong said. There's only more, no less. This was strange. When the war started, the Zhu family had tried their best, and they were short on supplies. Now that 200,000 troops had surrounded Jinjun, the resources became more abundant. Actually, it was not strange at all. Previously, everyone did not know who would win or lose and was afraid that their investment would go to waste. Now that they were about to win, all the merchants, nobles, and even the Inyuan Association were relieved to buy on credit. Every day, there were mountains of supplies being transported into the battlefield of the South Sea Nation. Anyone would be willing to do something as simple as adding flowers to something already perfect. For the sake of this battle, my Zhu family practically pulled out several decades' worth of wealth. I will never forget the kindness of grandfather and uncle, Crown Prince Ningyi said. Zhu Rong said, Your Highness, I'm not saying this to express my gratitude. I just want to tell you to be cautious. Cautious. More cautious. I understand, uncle, Crown Prince Ningyi replied. After you go to the Nan-Oyu Nation, you have to believe in Zhu Lin and Nangong Ao when it comes to war, Governor Zhu Rong said. They're all veterans of the battlefield. When these words came out, Crown Prince Ningyi was slightly unhappy. Zhu Rong, what do you mean by this? You don't believe me? To put it bluntly, he was going to be made into a bodhisattva statue for people to worship? This was what Zhu Rong really meant. Crown Prince, you only need people to come. As for your wisdom and talent, leave them for the future. This time, he would just sit back and enjoy the fruits of others' labor. Do you think I, Ning Yi, am a 3-year-old child? However, Zhu Rong didn't dare to be careless. If the 200,000-strong army was lost, the Zhu family's decades of business in Yu country would be in vain. The position of the Crown Prince was also almost at stake. Don't worry, uncle. I'll only bring my eyes and ears to the South Phoenix Nation this time, not my mouth. Zhu Rong knew that the Crown Prince was unhappy and quickly eased his tone. Your Highness, your words are too serious, too serious. The Crown Prince suddenly said, Shen Lang said that Jin Jun might be plotting something. What do you think, uncle? Governor Zhu Rong was silent for a moment before he said, As a commander, I have to consider everything. Shen Lang said that Jin Jun had a scheme to lure the snake out of its hole, but it was ridiculous. After all, he had lost 2/3 of his army. Therefore, this subject only has one word to the Crown Prince. Don't pursue a cornered enemy. Once Jin Jun escapes into the great southern kingdom, our army must not pursue her, not enter the forest, not enter the mountains. Crown Prince Ningyi nodded, I understand. Governor General Zhu Rong emphasized again, within the great southern kingdom, there are dense forests and high mountains everywhere. Our army can't display its full strength and will be dragged to death. Once Jin Jun escapes, don't pursue her. I understand. Crown Prince Ningyi said. The next day, Crown Prince Ningyi led an army of 10,000 and entered the territory of Ninh. At this point, the total number of Vietnamese soldiers on the battlefield had reached a shocking 210,000. 5 days later, the Crown Prince Ningyi had arrived at the battlefield. This Minister Zhu Lin pays his respects to His Highness the Crown Prince. This minister, Nangong Ao, pays his respects to the Crown Prince. These generals were still reserved, while the rest of the high-ranking officials and generals were very direct in their bootlicking. We hope that the Crown Prince is like the parents of a baby. Once His Highness is here, the overall situation will be set. Yes. His Highness the Crown Prince is here. Our hearts are at ease. Crown Prince Ningyi returned the bow meticulously, and then said, Elder sister, General Zhu Lin, General Nangong, you are all famous generals of your generation. I will completely rely on you to fight this battle. I'm here to learn, only my eyes and ears, not my mouth. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief when they heard this. What a general feared the most was the blind command of a superior. It couldn't be better for the Crown Prince to have such an attitude. But of course, everyone had to flatter him verbally. His Highness the Crown Prince is wise, and we will follow his lead. As long as the Crown Prince gave the order, he would go through fire and water without hesitation. Crown Prince Ningyi said, there are rumors in the capital that Jin Jun is lacking in food. Is this true? It's true, Princess Ning Luo said, because Ing Luo and the others have already started eating their own kind. As soon as these words came out, everyone couldn't help but vomit. All the injured soldiers of the San primitive tribe have been killed and made into dried meat, General Zhu Lin said. Is it true that a plague broke out in Jin Jun's army? Ningyi asked. It's true, Nangong Ao said, we saw it clearly from high above. The corpses were arranged neatly and then all burned. There are countless of them. If it wasn't for the plague, this wouldn't have happened. Was it true that Jin Jun's army had started to eat people? To be honest, the Sand primitive tribe had indeed done this before. However, after she unified the Sand primitive race, the first thing she did was to set a law that all cannibals would die. Then what was the so-called cannibalism that the scouts of U State saw? It was a dummy made of dough. He cut them off piece by piece, put them into a pot to cook, and then ate them. Because the distance was too far, and this matter was too shocking, no one doubted the authenticity of this matter. Especially the Sand primitive tribe, who had a previous record. So was the plague real or fake? It was normal for a plague to occur in the army. Especially for an army like the Sand primitive tribe, their hygiene was relatively poor. However, after Jin Jun ascended the throne, all the water in the army that he was in had to be boiled before drinking. He learned this from Shun Lang. Of course, the warriors of the Sand primitive tribe had survived in this harsh environment for a long time and had long developed a copper belly and iron stomach. No matter how dirty the drink was, no one would be affected. Therefore, many people felt that drinking boiled water was completely unnecessary. For this reason, Jin Jun even used special means. For example, they could poison the water and cause the warriors of the Sand primitive tribe who drank the water to have a large-scale disease. Of course, this group was cured, but it left a terrible mark. The scene was too horrible to look at. From then on, the Sand primitive army also began to drink boiled water. Not only that, but Jin Jun also brought in a few hundred Great Tribulation Temple's doctor monks. Therefore, there would not be a large-scale plague. So, why would there be rumors of a plague? It was very simple. He just had to let a group of people wrap themselves up and burn a large number of corpses. In this war, the Sand primitive army had suffered countless casualties. In the past, burial was a popular practice among the Sand primitive people. There was no such thing as burning corpses. Now, Jin Jun had given the order to cremate the bodies on a large scale. It was burning every day, and it was getting more and more every day. Moreover, the people who carried the bodies and burned them were all wrapped from head to toe. From burning dozens of corpses a day to burning hundreds of corpses a day. When the scouts of U country saw this, they naturally judged that there was definitely a plague. Humans were a very strange species. They were particularly willing to believe what they saw, and even more so, they believed in what they were willing to believe. For example, The man-eating of the sand primitive tribe was definitely true, and they must be short of food. If there wasn't a plague, why would they burn the bodies, and why would they be wrapped so tightly? That was why Jin Jun was awesome. He had completely unleashed his psychological tactics to the extreme. Even if she was acting to the extreme. Crown Prince Ning Yi was overjoyed. The right time, place, and people are all on my side. It would be hard not to win now. Generals, when can we start the war? His attitude was still very humble. Nangong Ao was too embarrassed to speak and looked at Zhu Lin. We've already finished our preparations. We can start the battle at any time. 3 days later, it will be the 9th of December. When Huang Daoji arrives, we can start the war. General Zhu Lin said. Nangong Ao nodded his head. Princess Ning Luo nodded. The Crown Prince Ning Yi said, "All right, the 9th of December it is. The entire army shall start a war and exterminate Jin Jun." Princess Ning Luo said, "There are many valiant generals on the battlefield now. There's no lack of a woman like me. I'll return to the capital of the Nan and kingdom now." Everyone nodded in agreement. The next day, Princess Ning Luo led an army of 10,000 and returned to the capital of the southern Oyu nation. If one were to look down at the entire battlefield, anyone would be shocked. On the ground that stretched for dozens of miles, there were military camps, ravines, and temporary fortresses made of wood. It was really boundless, covering the sky and covering the sun. The 210,000 troops of Yu country had completely surrounded the Blackwater stockade. Only 1/5 of the entire Blackwater village had been built. After more than 20 years, a lot of it had collapsed. Now, there were less than 3,000 mu left. The walls of the village were all made of wood and were about 2 zhang in height. It was high enough. However, after more than 20 years of wind and rain, they had begun to rot. They even began to shake when the wind blew. They wanted to rely on this wall to defend? It was almost impossible. In these 3 days, the Blackwater stronghold's Jin Jun camp was very quiet. They didn't eat or burn any corpses. But this made the army of Yu even more convinced that the sand primitive people were short of food and that a plague had broken out. The reason why they no longer ate people was because they knew that the final battle was coming, so they released all the remaining food. As for not burning people anymore, it was also because they knew that the final battle was about to break out, so it didn't matter if the plague spread further. Look, Jin Jun didn't even need to act, and Yu country's side could already imagine. Then how did Jin Jun know that the final battle was coming? Even a fool would know that it was because Crown Prince Ning Yi's flag had already been erected in every corner of the Yu country's military camp, high above. 3 days passed by quickly. On the 9th day of the 12th month, the 210,000-strong army of Yu country officially launched a general attack on the Blackwater village. The decisive battle between Crown Prince Ning Yi and Jin Jun was about to officially erupt. According to Ning Yi's imagination, he and Jin Jun should be king to king. It should be like in the history books, when the two countries started a war, the monarchs of the two countries would appreciate each other, talk to each other, and drink a few cups of wine. If that's the case, Ning Yi will definitely keep you company. In the end, Jin Jun didn't show up at all, which made Crown Prince Ning Yi very disappointed. This made him miss a chance to show the style of a king. The sun was about to rise. The generals of Yu country all looked at Crown Prince Ning Yi. They were waiting for his order. Crown Prince Ning Yi ascended the marshal's platform step by step. The commander's platform was very high, more than 100 feet high, and it could almost overlook the entire battlefield. He could also see the sand primitive army in the Blackwater village. With every step Ning Yi took, his heart was incomparably heroic, as if he had walked up to the throne in advance. After this battle, who can stop me from ascending to the throne of Yu country? No one can. Even his father, Ning Yuanxian, could not do it, let alone a useless person like Shen Lang, a clown. When I succeed the throne, Ning Zheng, Shen Lang, and Jin Zhuo will die. Jin Mulan, even after 5 or 10 years, you will still be mine. Don't worry, I can wait. At this moment, Crown Prince Ning Yi was even grateful to Jin Jun in his heart. Thank you for being so powerful, so magical, and forging my unparalleled achievements. Sha Zhao, you're destined to be my stepping stone. The more glorious your previous performance was, the more it highlighted my heavenly fate. When the crown prince ascends to the top, the sun suddenly rose. Was it a coincidence? Of course not. Ning Yi had calculated the time to climb the steps. Moreover, the first ray of sunlight shone directly on the marshal's platform, shining on Crown Prince Ning Yi's body. In an instant, his entire body turned golden, and he exuded an air of nobility. Dozens of generals and numerous soldiers of Yu country raised their heads and saluted. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers looked up at Ning Yi. It was truly the focus of everyone's attention. In everyone's eyes, Crown Prince Ning Yizhen was like the rising sun, unstoppable. Ning Yi slightly suppressed the surge of emotions in his heart. Where's Jin Jun? Why haven't you appeared? Why don't you let me see you? He took a deep breath. Today's battle will determine the peace and stability of our Yu country for the next few decades. Ning Yi roared. Long live, long live, long live. Victory for the Yu country. Victory for the Yu country. The 200,000-strong army shouted in unison. The sound shook the heavens. Crown Prince Ning Yi suddenly pulled out his sword and used all his strength to shout, "Let's start the war and kill all the sand primitive traitors." Instantly, a shocking war drum sounded. More than 100,000 soldiers of the Yu country rushed towards the fragile Blackwater stronghold like a tide. The final battle had erupted. The battle had entered a state of daytime right from the start. The wooden walls of the Blackwater stronghold were indeed fragile. In less than a quarter of an hour, almost all the walls of the village had been pushed down. Countless Vietnamese soldiers swarmed into the stronghold. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. The rain of arrows from the Sand primitive tribe had appeared. As expected, it was extremely sharp. However, how many waves of arrows could this rain be released? Although they had caused a huge number of casualties, compared to the number of soldiers of the Yu country, what was it? The two armies soon clashed in close combat. Hand-to-hand combat. There were nearly 200,000 people in Yu country, and less than 40,000 Sand primitive people. But the astonishing combat power of the Sand primitive tribe was on full display. With such a great disparity in military strength, they were actually evenly matched. There were no schemes, just a clash of blood and life. The entire battlefield was filled with killing. His blood chi soared to the sky. Crown Prince Ning Yi stood on the high platform, often letting out a sigh of relief. Before the battle, he was really worried that Jin Jun would have some plot in the Blackwater village. He even conjured up several horrifying images in his mind. For example, when the army rushed in, they found that there was almost no one inside. The Sand primitive army had all run away. There were also some who discovered that there were traps everywhere after they charged in. She even put herself in Jin Juan's shoes and considered how she should fight this battle. For example, they could excavate a large number of tunnels. Tens of thousands of people could excavate the entire underground of the Blackwater stockade in more than a month. The moment they entered the tunnel, the advantage of numbers would be completely lost. In the narrow tunnel, the flexibility and bravery of the Sand primitive warriors could be fully exerted. Another example was the plague tactic. The entire Blackwater village was filled with corpses infected with the plague. In short, who knew how many ways of fighting Ning Yi had conceived for Jin Jun in his mind? Because he felt that Jin Jun was a very powerful person and would definitely have some tricks up her sleeve. In the end, there was nothing at all. It was the most brutal, direct, and bloody battle. This was good, this was good. In such a close-range battle, I have several times more soldiers than you, what is there to fear? Jin Jun, everyone says you're powerful, but that's all you're capable of. I'm definitely going to win this battle. As the army of Yu country killed their way into the Blackwater village, the encirclement became smaller and smaller. But Ning Yi's smile soon disappeared. From the looks of it, the Vietnamese army had the absolute advantage. It was as if the vast ocean had surrounded a reef in the middle. However, it was also like a stormy sea crashing into a reef, instantly shattering into pieces. At the place where the two armies were fighting, The Yu army was actually at a disadvantage. How could the warriors of the Sand primitive tribe be so powerful? Less than 40,000 and he was defeated by nearly 200,000? This was not strange at all. At that time, Jin Jun's 100,000-strong army attacked the capital of the Nan-Oyu nation. Zhu Lin also had 100,000 troops guarding the city. Even with the city in his hands, they were almost taken down. Furthermore, in the previous battles, the Yu country, as the defending party, had suffered 20,000 to 30,000 more casualties than Jin Jun. At this time, in the field battle, the bravery of the Sand primitive warriors was fully displayed. In the hearts of the Yu generals, Jin Jun's army had experienced a shortage of rations and the plague, so they would definitely lose a lot of soldiers and have low morale. In fact, they did not reduce their numbers at all, and their morale was still high. This group of people were all lunatics who had struggled to survive from the brink of death since they were young. He had experienced more desperate situations than this, so what was this? Being surrounded by 4 to 5 times the number of enemies was of course terrifying, but was it more terrifying than being surrounded by a dozen wolves? The intense battle continued. The slaughter shook the heavens, and blood flowed like a river. The army of Yu country disappeared at an astonishing speed. Jin Jun's Sand primitive army was also suffering casualties, and the number was astonishing. However, the more they died, the crazier they became. In the end, he was like a crazy beast, taking the initiative to rush up and court death. Each of them looked as if they were going to die together. As for the army of Yu country, the more they fought, the more frightened they became. He even started to look left and right to see if there were still many people behind him. He needed a sense of security. This extremely bloody battle was like the sun melting snow. Every minute and every second, countless people were dying. Great General Zhu Lin's scalp went numb, and Nangong Ao's heart trembled. Why didn't this group of people feel despair? You've been surrounded for more than a month. Why aren't you depressed? Ning Yi, who was standing at a high place, was really shocked. He even trembled and said to Zhu Yan, "We won't lose, will we?" Were the warriors of the Sand primitive tribe really that strong? "I invite you to fight," General Zhu Lin said. Crown Prince Ningyi nodded and said, "Yes." Immediately, General Zhu Lin led his personal guards and charged into the battlefield. He led the most elite warriors of the Zhu family and stopped the decline. The army of Yu country had once again gained the upper hand. But another half an hour passed. The army of Yu state was in chaos once again. They had never experienced such a crazy battle. They were not facing an army, but a group of wild beasts. One of the armies of Yu country couldn't stand such a terrifying massacre and turned to escape. The entire situation was once again on the verge of collapse. "Your Highness, I invite you to battle," Nangong Ao said. Yes. Nangong Ao led a few thousand personal guards to battle. Once again he stopped his decline. Crown Prince Ningyi's entire body was ice cold. He didn't expect Jin Jun's army to be so valiant without any schemes. Even with such a great disparity in numbers, they were still able to force 2 great generals to personally fight. Another half an hour passed. The morale of another troop of Yu country collapsed, and they turned around and fled. The law enforcement team had already killed them with all their might, but they still couldn't stop them from running away. Even if the size of Yu country's army was still several times larger than Jin Jun's army, the entire war could collapse if an army fled. "Your Highness, I invite you to battle." This man was Zhang Zhao, the direct descendant of the Crown Prince, the former commander of Tianyue. The 10,000 cavalrymen he led were the last of the Yu country's army. Half of this army was brought by the Crown Prince from the capital, while the other half were elite knights from the noble families of Yu state. These 10,000 cavalrymen were there to hold the line and would not go out to battle. Their only goal was to protect the Crown Prince. But there was no other way now. The battle was on the verge of collapse. Zhang Zhao looked at Li Nanfeng from the Sky Sea Pavilion. "Don't worry. I have 200 warriors from the Sky Sea Pavilion. I will protect the Crown Prince." Li Nanfeng had absolute confidence. The 200 top warriors he led were all first-class experts who looked down on the martial Tao of the world. He might not be suitable for the battlefield, but he would definitely be able to protect the Crown Prince. Yes. Crown Prince Ning Yi ordered. Zhang Zhao led 10,000 cavalrymen and charged into the battlefield. Finally, he stopped his decline once again. Crown Prince Ning Yi's entire body was drenched, his scalp tingling. He had not expected the battle to be so dangerous and shocking. The three generals all went into battle. Even his own army had pressed forward. Finally, the fighting strength of the Junjun Sand Barbarian army had been squeezed to the extreme. The entire battlefield had entered another equilibrium point. The Yu army had once again gained the upper hand. Crown Prince Ning didn't know what the casualties on both sides were. But Li Nanfeng, who was beside him, estimated that the Sand Barbarian army should have more than 10,000 casualties, while the Yu army should have around 30,000 to 40,000 casualties. Crown Prince Ning Yi sucked in a breath of cold air when he heard the comparison of casualties. The soldiers of Yu actually wanted to exchange 3 for 1? What was even more infuriating was that even if the Vietnamese army had lost 30,000 to 40,000 soldiers, it would not be more than a quarter of their total losses. There were still 160,000 soldiers left, and they were on the verge of collapse. More than one-third of Jin Jun's San primitive army had been killed or injured, but their morale was still high. The difference in combat power between the two armies was too great. Fortunately, they were well prepared and had prepared 200,000 troops. Otherwise, this battle would have been a life-or-death situation. At this moment, the victory was basically set in stone. This was a kind of momentum. Once the balance of the war began to tilt, it would be difficult to reverse the situation without the influence of external forces. In the past, Yu country was on the verge of collapse several times, but new troops would rush over to help and stop the decline. But Jin Jun didn't have any reinforcements. Therefore, they were going to win this battle. Not good, Jin Jun is trying to break out. Li Nanfeng suddenly said. As expected, the remaining 20,000 Sand primitive soldiers were ready to break out of the siege. Moreover, the commander-in-chief and the general were at the very front, forming a sharp knife formation to break out of the encirclement. The person in the lead wore a silver mask and held a silver spear in his hand. He was valiant and invincible as he rode on a warhorse. There was almost no one who could match him. Was that Jin Jun? The figure seemed familiar. But Crown Prince Ning Yi couldn't care so much. Block him, we must not let the enemy break through. He ordered loudly. But it's useless. The difference in combat power between the soldiers on both sides was too great. Great General Zhu Lin and Great General Nangong Ao personally charged forward to block the enemy's main commander. He still couldn't stop him. The Vietnamese army was already afraid. Seeing that the Sand primitive army had broken out of the encirclement, they heaved a sigh of relief. The fierce battle just now was truly terrifying. They were not saints, nor were they wild beasts. They knew fear. Just like this. The general of the Sand primitive tribe led more than 20,000 troops and easily tore a hole in the encirclement of the Yu country. They broke out and killed their way out. Zhu Lin and Nangong Ao led the cavalry in pursuit. However, the Blackwater village was still flat. Outside the Blackwater village, there were forests and mountains everywhere. It was not conducive to the pursuit of the cavalry. These warriors of the Sand primitive tribe broke up into small groups and went into the mountains and forests at a very fast speed as if they were on flat ground. He couldn't catch up at all. This kind of terrain, facing this kind of army, really made people despair. There were clearly cavalrymen and hundreds of thousands of soldiers, but they could only watch as they broke out of the encirclement and escaped without a trace. However, Crown Prince Ning Yi did not feel dejected. It's good that you won. It's good that you won. He was a pragmatic person. They were completely shocked by the fierce battle that had lasted for a few hours. He no longer wanted to destroy Jin Jun. To be able to drive him out of the South Phoenix country, to be able to defeat him, it was a great victory. Anyway, he could write whatever he wanted. A win was a win. Even though it was not a complete victory, it was still a great victory. And at this moment, the general of the Sand primitive tribe turned back. Riding on a tall horse, he looked at Crown Prince Ning Yi from afar. Crown Prince Ning Yi was startled. This person was Jin Jun? Why was he wearing a silver mask? He didn't want to meet Ning Yi before, what did he mean now? Although the army of the Sand primitive tribe was extremely powerful, Jin Jun had lost after all. And at this moment, the general of the Sand primitive army took off the silver mask on his face. His heroic face was revealed. The crown prince's entire body trembled. He could not believe his eyes. It was actually him? Ha ha, Ning, you didn't expect it to be me, right? You didn't expect me to still be alive, did you? This person, Su Nan, the former Marquis Yuan of Yu country. No wonder the silver spear was invincible. No wonder Crown Prince Ning Yi felt that she looked very familiar. It was actually Su Nan? Wasn't he already dead? Now, not only was he not dead, but his martial arts seemed to have advanced. Crown Prince Ning Yi's entire body went cold and he trembled. The enemy's commander was not Jin Jun? Then where was Jin Jun? Thinking of a certain possibility, Crown Prince Ning Yi's heart was on the verge of collapse. Su Nan's death will not cause trouble for the protagonist. She will be very useful.